Yeah. Alright. Night class. Your tutor is Sidiki Sonny students King Francois Bindush Pandish Kambundia Bintu Pantush Kevo Lord Francois Lord Francisco Lord Francis King Sidiki Francis. Okay. So tonight we're going to have class. We're going to have high definition algebra. Okay? Yes. Alright. So we're doing high definition algebra. So tonight we have let's see. Let's step up the pace. Well, tonight we have 432,000 trillion. Okay, S. We have 432 trillion S. Another from 432 trillion S, we have 5S. Other from 5S, we have 20 million S. You get me? Other from 20 million S, we have pi. You get me? And we have an equal sign with 100 with 400 a equal sign with 432 trillion and 22 million. You get me? I remember we have pi s. So let's get to the work. Alright, so how much time 5 can go into 432 trillion? Bumbo clot. I mean, brain me have to go use and do that. Sorry for the expletives. Sorry about the expletives, class. Oh, me I go use no my brain. Okay, I got a brain as a super highway. Alright, how many times 5 can go into 432 trillion? Remember, 432 trillion, you put 400 and then you write 12 zeros for 32 trillion on your calculator in your phone. Alright, so 5 goes into 432 trillion. 40 trillion 800 billion times. 40 trillion 800 billion times 5 can divide it into 432 trillion. 5 divided into 432 trillion. 5 divided into 432 trillion. 40 trillion 800 billion times 5 can divide it into 432 trillion. Alright, how many times 5 can divide it into 20 million S. 5S in 20 million S. Well, 5S goes into 20 million S. How many times? Well, 5S goes into 20 million S 2 million times. 2 million times 5 can divide it into 20 million. Alright, my brain moves like a super highway. So pi now, 5 goes into pi how many times? 200,000 times, because pi is 2 million. If we have 432 trillion, I should say 432 trillion S, and we have 5S, and other from 5S we have 2 million S, which is pi. Pi is 2 million S, and remember we already have 20,000 S because we find out pi. So you see why we are gonna have a total of 432 trillion 22 million and $5. You get me? That's why we have a total of that. So how many times 5 goes into 432 million? 5 goes into 432 million class. 40 trillion 800 billion times 5 can divide it into 32 into 432 trillion. 5 can divide it into 432 trillion. 40 trillion 800 billion times 5 divided into 432 trillion. Alright, and 5 can divide it into 20 million. How many times, class? 5 divided into 20 million. 2 million times. And 5 divided into pi, which is pi is 2 million. How many times? 5 goes into pi. 5 goes into pi 200,000 times. Okay? Alright, high definition algebra class. Now, let's get to work. That was lesson S. Now, remember, in lesson S, we got 5 that divided into 432 million, and we found out that 5 can go into 432 million. 40 trillion 800 billion times 5 can divide it in 432 trillion dollars. Okay? Alright. Now, other from that, we found out that 5 can divide it into 20 million. How many times? 5 divided into 20 million, 2 million times. Alright? And other from that, how many times 5 we divided into pi? 5 divided into pi 200,000 times, because pi is $2 million. If we use up the 433 trillion, if we use up the 433 trillion and get 40 trillion and 80 billion when 5 divided into it, and put that aside, and then go for the 20 million and used 5 to divide the 20 million, and found out that 5 goes in 20 million 2 million times, then we gonna leave back with $2 million and $5, and we already be using the 5. So we start to use the 2 million because pi is the 2 million. You get me? So we use 5 and divided in the 2 million and found out it goes 200,000 times. 5 divided in $2 million. Okay? Alright. Now class. Next lesson. That was lesson S. Now lesson H. We using SHF for the abbreviation of my name, Sadiq Sonny Francis. Remember, that's your tutor. Okay? Alright. So let's go to work now. Lesson H. Alright. We have 10H. And other from 10H. Other from 10H. We have 8 trillion. You get me? Other from 8 trillion H, we have how many million? Well, we have 10 million H. You get me? Other from 10 million H, we have pi H, and we have an equal sign with 8 trillion and 8 trillion and 20 million and $10. Okay, this one's gotta be easy for you. So how many times 10 can goes into 8 trillion? Well, 10 goes into 8 trillion. Let me check now, class. Check. 10 goes into 8 trillion. How many times? Well, 10 goes into 8 trillion. 400 billion times 10 goes into 8 trillion. That's how many times 10 divided into 8 trillion. You get me? So 10h goes into 8 trillion h. 400 billion times. You get me? Alright? So, alright, now we are done discussing the 8 trillion. Now, other from that, how many times 10 goes into 20 million? Well, 10 goes into 20 million 1 million times. 10 goes into $20 million. Alright? And pi, 10 goes into pi 1 million times, because pi is 20 million as well. If we got an equal sign with 8 trillion and 40 million and $10, if we got an equal sign with 8 trillion and 40 million and $10, and we use the 10 to divide 8 trillion and found out that 10 goes into 8 trillion 400 billion times, and other from that we found out that 10 goes into 20 million. How many times again, class? 10 goes into 20 million. 10 goes into 20 million 1 million times. 1 million times 10 goes into 20 million. And other from that we found out that 10 goes into pi 1 million times, because 20 million. If we use trillion and we use the 20 million and we have 20 million left back, that means pi is 20 million. Alright, class? So that's lesson H. Now lesson F. Well, lesson F, we have 4 trillion and 4 trillion F, and other from 4 trillion F we got 20F, and other from 20F we got 20F we got 40 F, 40,000 F, I should say. So we got, remember class, we got 4 trillion F, 40,000 F, 20 F. Other from that we got pi. You get me? So we got pi. Yeah. So pi F. So we have an equal sign now of of 16 trillion and 40,000 dollars and $10. Okay, so let's go to work. So remember, we did have 8, how much? No, it was 4 trillion. Okay, we have 4 trillion. So you found out from an instant what pi is. You get me? So we don't have to discuss what pi is gonna be, because instantly you found out that pi F got to be $12 trillion. You get me? From an instant, if we already have the 4 trillion, pi is gotta be $12 trillion. If we gonna use the 4 trillion, pi gotta be $12 trillion. If we have 16 trillion and 40,000 and $10 as the equal sign, and we gonna use the 4 trillion. That means that pi no, that means that pi eventually got to be 12 trillion. You get me? Because if we got 16 trillion 40,020 dollars as the equal sign, you know that pi eventually got to be 12 trillion. You get me? Because we're going to use the 4 trillion now. How many times 20 can goes into 4 trillion? Well, 20 goes into 4 trillion dollars. How many times? Well, 20 goes into 4 trillion dollars 100 billion times. 20 can goes into 4 trillion dollars divided into 4 trillion dollars 100 billion times. Remember, 4 trillion dollars is 4 and 12 zeros. Okay? And other from that, let's see now. How many times 20 can goes into 40,000? Well, 20 goes into 40,000. 20 in 40,000. Well, that's 1,000 times. 20 can divide it into 40,000. Okay? Yeah. So that 20F divided into 40,000 F. Okay? Now, how many times 20 can divide it into pi? Because pi is literally 12 trillion dollars. Okay? So 5 goes into 12, 20 goes into 20F goes into pi F. How many times? Pi F is 12 trillion dollars. Okay, so it goes into it 300 billion times. 20 can goes into 12 trillion dollars. Remember, 12 trillion dollars is 12 and 12 zeros. 12 and 12 zeros. Okay, so that's lesson F. So we do lesson F and that's it. We already did lesson S and lesson H, and lesson F was the last. Now, have a wonderful night, class. Oh, and Miss Europe, I really love you. Vindu, vindu, vandush, Kevin, do, vandu, vindu, I do. Vindu, love you, Miss Europe. Twin, Miss Europe. I really love you, and I really care. Bindu, Bandu, Chicago. And this year, 2019, you take care. Bindu, Bandu, Chicago. Bandu, Labu, Abunda. Selena Gomez, Labu, Abun, even Tush, even Dash, Govunda, people. And Kylie Jenner, Bindu, Sinda, Sintu, Skintu, Labundia, Bunduya. Abundu, Miss Europe, Abundu, Funda Vindu, Sintave, Avunde, Avundi, Avunde, Sindavundi Eve, Avundi Vanvundu, Sindu Vendu, Vandu, Sevo, Sinvunde, Avundi, Sindu Venadunda Vio, Vindu, Venda, Fundio. Francisca veo vindu, François Francisco vandu vindu, Francia vindu vindu vindu, Francia vindu 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 vindu, Vandushke vanda, Monsieur 2020 vandu, Miss France vindu vindu sindu, Miss Ukraine, Monsieur 2019 vindu sindu, Avo vindu.